Welcome to Worldy Unboxed, the Founders Edition. I am Brandon, one of the co-founders of Worldy, and I will be serving as your host for this episode. As a reminder, the format for the Founder Edition episodes is that we bring you along for a conversation that we have with the founder, and then at the end of the episode, Aaron and I discuss some of the points that really stood out to us and how we can apply those points to our venture. During this episode, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Jay Davis, the founder and CEO of Creatably, a company that has helped put brands like Pillowcube, Thread, Manly Bands, Kizik, and most recently, Cold Case Ice Cream on the map with their disruptive approach to marketing. We discuss various topics such as how Jay got started with entrepreneurship, break down Cold Case Ice Cream and the ice cream industry, talk about how startups with small budgets can harness the power of video, and get Jay's insight on the outlook of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer business models. So enough from me. Let's jump into the conversation.
Yeah, so I always kind of tell people this, but I'm not like your super tip entrepreneur in that like I wasn't selling stuff door to door as a 7-year-old or, starting businesses in elementary school like a lot of entrepreneurs, which is really cool. Like I think there's that group that like sell a lot or they get into kind of like, pitching and so I had friends in high school who like sold candy out of their backpack and that wasn't me. I think I always liked entrepreneurship more from like the strategic side. My dad's a consultant for Fortune 500 companies, and so we kind of talked about business. That was like kind of what we talked about, business and basketball. And so, yeah, I just always loved business. Like it was kind of weird. Even in like high school, college, I just was like, man, I really am fascinated by how do companies start? Why do they start? How do you run them? All of those things. So it was really fun. It was something that like I naturally love business, but I was originally planning on doing strategy. I was going to do a strategy major in the business school at BYU, and I was going to go work for like one of the big like BCG, Bain, McKinsey, just because I love that kind of like kind of problem solving, all of that stuff. So that was kind of my plan. And then in college, I just started like kind of goofing around. And now I look back there, like as like a sophomore in my undergrad, I was like trying to start businesses with friends, and they were just so dumb. Like the stuff we came up with. And I look back and I'm like, oh, that is crazy. But it was really fun. Like I really liked the process, and I think that that's what's good is like you got to kind of get going and it's just a messy being an entrepreneur is a very unique kind of messy thing. And so I tried some things in college. Some stuff did better than others. Some made some money, which was awesome. And then I got a job because I got married kind of near the end of college, and my wife wanted to have like a house and food and stuff, which is weird. You can't
Imagine that.
quite live that true entrepreneur life uh, when you're married and have a baby on the way eventually. So I got a job, and it was an awesome job. Like I got a job at a place here in Utah called Vivint. It actually eventually became Vivint, but at the time it was called Apex Alarm. But they were doing probably like 100 million at the time, and it was awesome. Like I was able to see like here's what a business is like when you're doing 100 million a year and you have a bunch of employees and you're scaling and you're trying to get to the billion level and you're trying to disrupt an industry. And so I really got to kind of observe great entrepreneurs without it being me being the entrepreneur. So that was a really great experience. Then after that, I left and joined a company called The Color Run, which was like kind of the first 5K with colored powder company to do that. And I was one of the first employees and got to help build that out and do the marketing for that, and fell in love with viral marketing. And that just went kind of crazy. Like it went from an idea no one had ever heard of. And first year we had 60,000 people do it. So it just went nuts and it was super fun. So I did that and then just kind of kept doing more entrepreneurial things and kind of honing the skills and getting better. And then in 2017, I started Creatably, which is my marketing agency, and we started working with clients and helping them scale and grow. And then in 2019, we decided, hey, let's start one of our own brands. And so we started Pillow Cube, and that's been a really fun experience. So now we keep starting more stuff and doing more things, and I keep being like, I should stop this because I have more than enough on my plate. But anyways,
And then one of the things that you actually haven't mentioned yet is Cold Case. So can you tell us a
yeah,
little bit about that and what you're doing there?
yeah. So last year I've been friends for many years with a guy here in Utah who owns a really great ice cream shop, and it's like my favorite ice cream. And anytime I would go travel, I would go get ice cream. Me and my wife love ice cream, and so when we go on family trips or work trips, I usually try and find good ice cream. And I just could never find anything as good. Like New York has amazing food and absolutely horrible ice cream. Like every ice cream place there is like garbage. And so I kept being like, man, this guy's stuff is so good. And so finally I was like, hey, what we should build like a D2C brand that leverages your amazing flavors, but also kind of lets you do some things that you probably wouldn't do here in Utah. Just kind of wilder flavors, a little more mature flavors, things that are pretty unique. And let's build kind of this fun D2C brand. And so we started coming up with ideas, and we thought it'd be cool to do something that was not just the experience of food, but like truly experiential. And so we came up with the idea of like, what if you did kind of like a true crime podcast themed ice cream box? And so you're combining like games with ice cream, and it's like this whole experience. So it's been really fun to see. And we just went to a convention this week, like a really big food and ice cream convention. And pretty awesome to see how many people are like, ah, I've seen Cold Case and I've watched your videos, and you guys are, kind of the new thing coming up and disrupting the industry. So
What would you say is the problem with the current ice cream industry, and why do you think it's ripe for disruption?
yeah, so I think there's some. I always like looking at kind of waves and trends, and so one of the trends that I see is that people, especially after COVID, really want unique experiences. So they're kind of wanting more out of their their products, and so that's something like as we especially look at like retail opportunities, it's something that we are looking at and saying, like how can we make just like without spending a ton of money, like what are some little things we can add to the product to make it feel unique and different and just something that's really brings a lot of like excitement and joy to people. I think another thing that trend in the ice cream space is like there were all these really cool things that came out with like super low calorie, kind of healthier, like getting rid of the lactose, getting rid of this a lot of stuff so that it's like a healthier experience. But I love like have you read the book Zag? So it's like basically the whole book is like when everyone's zigging, you need to zag. And I think it's just a great point that like, hey, anytime everyone's doing something, you're usually going to do really well if you're doing the opposite. And that's hard because you're going against the grain. Like when I first started Creatably, a lot of people are like, I feel like those types of videos are kind of played out, and form doesn't work. Facebook tells me I should be doing short form. And so it's hard. It was hard to like pitch people and be like, no, you're wrong. Like, here's why Facebook's wrong. Like, luckily I had kind of the viral experience to be able to have the ability to say that I thought I was right and Facebook was wrong. But like I think that's just a challenge of innovating is like most people are going to look at what you're doing and be like, that's kind of crazy. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where I think there's some cool trends where people are wanting they're wanting really cool experiences. They're willing to spend money. And when we look at like if we just were talking to some retailers and you go into their dairy section and there's all kinds of cool things happening in the dairy section, like, alternative. Have you seen like the French yogurt?
I don't think
French
so.
yogurt.
I don't think so.
I've seen
so
Greek
like
yogurt.
Yeah, I've seen Greek yogurt,
so
but not
Greek
French.
yogurt,
Yeah.
new thing, guys, French yogurt.
Oui.
So like French yogurt is like, yeah, it's actually called wheat. That's
There you
its
go.
name.
Look at that.
So OUI. So they came out with these, like, they come in glass bottles. They're more expensive. They're a lot creamier. They're not as strong of a taste, and they like have blown up in the US. So if you go to like kind of higher end, like a Whole Foods, they're starting to blow up there. Now they're starting to go into Walmart. They're going into Target. You know, glass bottled milk and chocolate milk is coming back. Like, there's a lot of innovation kind of happening in the dairy section. And then you go to the frozen section, especially frozen dairy, and it's kind of what was like happening 10, 15 years ago. Like Ben and Jerry's every once in a while comes out with a new flavor, but it's kind of half baked in everything they've had for 20 years. Halo Top went crazy and kind of blew up there, but like, especially in the last couple of years, there just hasn't been some of those like innovations and new things. And so we're just trying to figure out like, hey, where do we zag while everyone else is digging? And so yeah, that's kind of the challenge of innovation.
Yeah, I was planning to ask you about the better for you trend and kind of like what you think about that. You touched on it already, but are you guys almost like the complete opposite in terms of being an indulgence? So it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be healthy because it's almost like a not a celebratory thing, but something you do on like birthdays,
Yeah.
weddings, stuff like that. So I guess, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that kind of summarizes it pretty well. Like, I think we view it as, there's a lot of times where you do want to treat and you do want to have something that's not kind of good for you and healthier option. Those things aren't bad either. But I think again, it's like we kind of went that way, and I think a lot of customers are like, yeah, I still want to every once in a while have like a real treat and something that feels like super indulgent. I think another thing that we saw, and this is another kind of part of that, not as much the good for you, but kind of more the innovation, is like people started to go to get it. Everyone started doing like really weird flavors of ice cream. So like, I think 2017, 2018, 2019, like people started doing like mac and cheese ice cream and pickle ice cream. And so we wanted to kind of like turn that trend on its head, where it's like, hey, we're doing flavors you've never heard of, but it's like if you went to a Michelin starred ice cream shop, what would you see? Not like, what would you like eat, but kind of makes you want to throw up. I don't want to do that as much. So like, not to talk crap about Salt and Straw, but like Salt and Straw has a Thanksgiving dinner one, and when I've had it, I'm like, oh, that's not nearly as bad as I expected. It's not like a great glowing review. And so we've tried to do stuff that people eat and they're like, man, I would have never put those flavors together, but they don't gross me out. It doesn't make me like grossed out. So we'll see what happens. You're always, I think the other thing with innovation, and this is a real crucial piece of being an entrepreneur, is entrepreneurs are not people who like constantly know which door to go in. They're just the people who are willing to like go in every door and then quickly figure out which ones are the wrong doors. And so if you're willing, if you want to innovate, you got to just be willing to like, yeah, oh no, that was a dumb idea. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, next thing. So you gotta eliminate possibilities quickly.
That makes sense. And I like that. Another trend that I've heard you guys talk about is this idea of people wanting to trade up even in a down economy. So can you just kind of explain that, and I guess how you stumbled upon that insight and why it makes sense for Cold Case?
Yeah. So, that definitely is an insight that I got from my partner and one of the investors in Cold Case, whose name is Michael Silverstein. He's he used to be a partner at BCG, helped kind of build the consumer division there. So super genius. He's worked with tons of people, and he wrote a book called Trading Up. And so something that him and his co-authors found was like, you'll often find people who wouldn't be kind of the typical customer you would expect of a certain luxury thing. But because that's like kind of their thing, like they're willing to spend more money on it. So an example they use in the book is like the guy who maybe only makes 50, 60 grand a year and works at a utility company, but has a $2,000 bag of golf clubs. Or a girl who, just got out of college, but spends $800 on a Louis Vuitton bag or something else, and that's kind of like their thing, and they're willing to sacrifice and save up. So I think that's a trend that we're trying to leverage, is people are wanting unique food experiences. I think that's like definitely right now, just because of Yelp and I think it's Belly. Have you guys used Belly?
I have not.
I think Josh actually got me onto it. I'm trying to remember. I think it's BELI. Basically, you rate everything you've ever had and then like say like, is this one better or is this one better? And it basically creates like a ranking of all the food you've ever had, like food places. Yeah, Belly, BELI. So I think because of those apps, like it's made it so we now like you can fly to New York and you can know like what are the best pizza places. And so I think across the country especially, but even like first world countries, we're all having like way better food than probably our parents had. Like I don't think a lot of, if your parents grew up in the Midwest, they probably didn't go to a lot of like these amazing spots in New York because it would be impossible to even know where they are. And now that's like everyone can have access to it. So I think what that is creating from a trend standpoint is people are always looking to kind of like, what's the next level of experience? And we've democratized that in a way that now a lot of people are saying, what's the next level up? And so, 30 years ago, I don't think this would have worked because you didn't have as many foodies. Like foodies kind of didn't exist unless you lived in LA or New York or San Francisco. And now you have, foodies who live in North Dakota. And their thing is like going and trying the craziest food experiences wherever and whenever they can. And so that's definitely another trend we're trying to leverage, is people wanting to have that unique experience, which also plays into social media. Social media is all about doing things first and showing your friends that you did it first. So,
And would you say foodies are kind of the target consumer, or is it broader than that?
yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of the group we're going after. We're going after the people who are like, I want to try something that is super unique and different, and just the whole experience. You get, a golden shovel spoon in an evidence bag. There's like a file folder that looks like a case file that's like all gold foil, and it like gives you a case file for each flavor and what's in it and how we made it. And so it's definitely people who are like, oh, I'm willing to spend to like have that really unique experience.
And so that's something that we've thought about with our company in terms of making that unboxing experience fun. So
Yeah.
the things that you've done, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's super expensive, but I guess how did you think about the economics of making that unboxing experience fun, and whether it actually is worth it, and whether people actually enjoy it enough for it to make sense from a financial
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah. So I think the thing that I always look at is like, I always try and look at like, where's the places where we can kind of do some arbitrage where, we can maybe spend a little, but get like a really big outsized return. And so that's something that we've tried to continually optimize and do is, if someone's buying $150 box of ice cream, throwing in a 50-cent shovel spoon is not like a huge added cost, but it makes people feel like, wow, this is a very unique experience. And so we tried to think of like, what are those things that we can do? Printing paper is not usually super expensive. And so printing off some extra materials that makes them really feel like, wow, this is a very unique custom experience. And then just, I think another big part of that is like talk to customers. You have to be willing to go ask people like, did you like it? Was it, kind of what you were hoping for? What did you not like about it? And I think by doing that, it really opens it up to improving. I think anytime I talk to a brand and they've kind of stayed the same way, I'm like, you probably don't talk to people enough, because we're constantly tweaking things. Like we're constantly tweaking our packaging. We're especially on Pillow Cube at its scale and size, like we're constantly tweaking the foam, the materials, just always trying to make it better and deliver the best product we can for customers.
So just like more broadly, what's your launch strategy? You talked about going to events. Is it going to be primarily direct to consumer and then getting into retail, or just how are you doing brand
Yeah.
activations, pop-ups? Like how are you thinking about all that stuff?
Yeah, so kind of our initial focus was doing content and videos that would kind of get the brand out there and spread the word. And so that's been really fun to see those work and get out there and lots of people see them. So that's been interesting. I think that's usually like a big bar launch strategy, and it's been interesting to learn a lot from that experience. Like, we were worried, like, are we going to get canceled? Are people going to be mad about this? And I think one of the funny things is, um, we very much tried to like not, we try never to like punch down. We try and make it something that's just like unexpected. And, as we pitched the actors on that video, and several of them are very well known, like the main guy, Brad Williams, is a very well known comedian and is blowing up. Like he thought it was awesome, and he was really excited that we'd created something that we were like, hey, we want this to be an ad that like only little people work on. And so like a lot of the crew were little people. It was really fun. Like it was cool to see that for them. It was something that was exciting. And so yeah, just tried to do something that would stand out, that would grab people's attention, that when people see, they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And then from there, we're kind of leveraging that in retail, because that's really where like the volume is in ice cream. Is like most people buy ice cream at their grocery store. So that's kind of the next step, is getting placements into more and more retail, and just keep expanding there. So
I want to switch gears a little bit and start to talk about Creatably. So you
yeah.
mentioned a little bit about that before, but what was the inspiration behind starting that? And I guess how did you realize the value of video for some of these consumer companies?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that, I started Creatively in 2017 because I had been doing that for 5 years at that point. And it was just something people asked me to do. Like people would be like, hey, can you help me with this marketing campaign? And I realized that there was probably like the big trend I noticed was every year they would say what percentage of spend in the advertising industry was going towards traditional and what was going towards social media. And so I think I saw the first time I kind of like clued into that was like probably 2015, 2016. And I was like, oh, interesting. Every single year, more and more budget is shifting to social media. And I'd already been doing, like, I've been doing social stuff. Like the Color Run campaign launched in 2012, like early 2012. So it wasn't like I was like new to it, but I started to recognize that like social is just going to get bigger and bigger. And the traditional agencies didn't really seem to be like pivoting to really like focus on social, which, if you've read Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, like that's very typical of an innovation. The incumbent players kind of ignore it or dismiss it, like, it's stupid. Social will never be like TV, which to me is weird because it's like it basically is TV. But yeah, that was like probably the trend that I saw, that I was like, well, at some point that's going to be 51% spent on social. And then at some point it's going to be 60 and 70. And there might come up where like traditional is very, very small. So like I want to build an agency that focuses on um, being kind of like really kind of getting ahead in that industry. So
How would you recommend? So not, every startup can afford an agency.
yeah.
So how would you recommend that those companies or startups think about video? Like how can they still harness the power of video, even if they can't afford an agency?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. What I always tell people is, look at some of those core questions that a lot of times people forget to ask, like who's our customers? Why would they want to buy? What would motivate them? Um, what's the pain they're feeling? Like our videos pretty much follow the formula of how you convince someone that something is a good idea. Like, here's the pain, here's the solution. Um, Here are your objections, and then overcoming those objections, giving them some social proof, and then giving them a call to action. So that's like the formula we follow. We try not to be too formulaic, but that's like kind of the core pieces of how you convince someone that something is a good idea. So if you're a small brand, like I would always say, just start creating and seeing what resonates. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. Like, um, it's pretty straightforward. Like, create something, and then go put $50 on it, put $100 on it, and see, what kind of comments you get. We've even done this, and I've told entrepreneurial students this. Like, I spoke at a college, and they were all saying like, oh, all my professors say that to do a price test, I got to do like, this regression analysis or something. I don't know. It was like succulus. I was like, dude, just make like 3 different ads that are the exact same with different prices, and then run them on Facebook with $50 each, and see which gets the best click through. Like, that's a easier way to do it than like hiring a, and the reason that professor had said that is because that's what like Fortune 500s would hire him to do when they were doing price tests. And it's like, yeah, but you're not a Fortune 500. Like, you got to be scrappier. There was a guy I saw the other day who did a great ad. He's got like a men's sweating product, and he just filmed a video in a podcast room. He like went to a podcast room that you can rent out by the hour in most cities, and he filmed himself interviewing himself, pretending like he wasn't like he was 2 different people and dressed in 2 different outfits, and was like, "Oh, you're the founder of this company," and he's like, "Yep, yeah, like this is why I started it." And it followed kind of those same things. Like, here's the pain. I sweat like crazy. I always had pit stains, and here was my pain, and here's how I solved it, and here's the science behind it, and here's why it works, and here are all my customers who love it. And he showed some videos of customers raving about it. And if you have the same problem, you should go buy this today. Like, that's something that most people can make even with an iPhone. Like, 15 years ago, what I was what we were using for videos is like not nearly as powerful as the iPhone 15. When I did Color Run, we paid $2,500 an hour to hire a helicopter to get some aerial footage. And the aerial footage honestly sucked because they had to be so high up that it was just like an overhead shot. And then like 3 years later, it was like, oh, you can buy a DJI with a way better camera for $2,500, and you can use it forever. And so that's something that I think people have to really buy into, is like, dude, there's an app on my phone that I use a lot. It's called Filmic Pro. Basically, like, turns your phone camera into like a cinema grade camera. And like, I shot some footage for our new travel pillow ad while I was on vacation using it, and it's like basically makes it so your phone almost acts like a red camera, or like an RE, which are these super expensive, super amazing cameras, but that's kind of the difference. So I think that's the thing I always try and encourage people to do, is like, just get going, just start.
So you've worked with a few different kind of like kids companies, right? So Pillow Cubs, Stair Slide, Gab. What have you learned about just kids marketing in general from those projects?
So I think the hardest thing about kids products is you're marketing to both the parent and the child. It's really tricky. So like, you want the kid to see it so that they get it, and want it, but you also need the parent to see it so that they approve and buy it. And so that's really hard. Like the end purchaser is not the same as the end user, which makes it difficult.
And then you've worked with Kizik, which is a footwear company. So what have you
Yeah.
learned about footwear in general or marketing in that space?
Yeah. So I think footwear is very interesting because like people have different needs, I think. It really depends on the person. Like some people really want athletic shoes, some people do it almost purely for style. So I think really leaning into that, like it was hard with Kizik, especially in the early days, because most people when they saw the ads were like, only lazy people would not want to tie their shoes. And so it took a long time to convince people, but they really held true to that vision they had, which is like once people tried the shoe, they loved them. But the biggest hurdle was like people being like, I can tie my shoes. I'm not lazy. And so that was like a huge hurdle that Kizik had to overcome. And so I think really focusing on the pain you're solving and how you solve it is super crucial because it's really easy to like think you're a fashion brand, but then also try and be like a utility brand. And so Kizik did a good job of that, but they had to balance. Like early on, the shoes were pretty ugly, so they had to make them at least good looking enough that people would want to wear them. But they've still done a great job of not losing that vision of what they are. So
And then I think I saw that Pillow Cube got 1 billion impressions in its first 3 years. I guess how'd you guys do that?
a lot of ad spend. So yeah, I mean, that was really like making ads that people share and like. And so I think it's that combination of making something that people both enjoy watching, educates them as it entertains them, but then also gets them to buy. Because if you have those three things together, people will share it, people will learn from it, and people will buy from it. And so you can put a ton of spend behind it.
And then just last question, are there any trends that you're seeing in e-com and direct to consumer that maybe other people haven't really caught on to yet?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things in ecom that are kind of interesting and happening right now. I think one, there's obviously a huge shift to profitability, which is very interesting. I think another thing that's happening is consumer companies are finally realizing they can't build their companies like tech companies. They need to be a little different. And so I'm noticing that the best consumer companies are pretty small and pretty lean. Like I know people who have consumer brands that do hundreds of millions a year in revenue and they have like 40, 50 employees, which is pretty incredible. Where, kind of that older guard of consumer companies that are now really struggling, like Allbirds and Bonobos, like have tons and tons of employees, like thousands and thousands, even when they only have a couple 100 million in revenue. And so I think that's a huge shift of like that we're going to see in consumer of, you got to just leverage all this technology and Shopify and all these things so that you can stay insanely lean.
Appreciate you taking the time
Yeah.
to talk to us.
Yeah, that was really cool. A lot of helpful insight.
You bet. Well, thanks for having me and let me know if you need anything.
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
So the first thing that I wanted to ask you is because Jay was talking a little bit about his experiences with entrepreneurship at the beginning of our conversation. And what he said is that he's not a typical entrepreneur. So he wasn't starting businesses in elementary school, all that kind of stuff. So the question I had for you is, were you doing that stuff? When did you get interested in entrepreneurship? When did you realize it was something that maybe you wanted to pursue?
So I guess I'm kind of like Jay in that I didn't have like a lemonade stand set up when I was 5 or anything like that. I did kind of try to do like some entrepreneurial endeavors while I was in college, sort of around like the shoe industry. So I was trying to sell shoes on like eBay. So we would try to get like shoes and try to sell them off on eBay. And it kind of worked, but really didn't. And it wasn't until like I started really like I think maybe as a lieutenant in the Air Force, really started thinking about like entrepreneurship as where I wanted to see myself. And like I would explore like looking into restaurants at the time, I was like, oh yeah, let me see about like franchising stuff and like even signing up for Hamburger University, which is like McDonald's like franchisee kind of thing. So I don't know. I was looking at like different things that I could do, not necessarily knowing exactly what industry that I wanted to kind of break into. So I guess I was sort of like Jay in that I didn't really have that entrepreneurial drive as a kid, but it certainly manifested itself later on. So maybe I'm a late bloomer. What about you?
I think it's pretty similar for me. So I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur until maybe college, but I had done some of that kind of like entrepreneurial stuff in when I was younger. I just didn't necessarily realize it until I look back. So I had a lemonade stand at some point in time, but I wasn't making much money at all. I remember in high school, I made this study guide that was really good. And then I kind of like made it private, and then I started charging people $1 to get access to it. And it didn't really work out because one person got it, they downloaded it, and they just sent it out to everybody. But I guess back then I was more interested in like if I've done something that's valuable, like let me try to monetize it. But I wasn't necessarily just looking for ways to become an entrepreneur. So I feel kind of similar to Jay in the sense that I wasn't in high school like creating a nonprofit or some kind of business, which some people I've met in college had done. But I really like kind of like you, I really got interested in entrepreneurship in college, started looking into it. And once I got a taste of it, something that I just really enjoyed. I knew that I wanted to do full time at some point, which leads into my next question, which Jay is, I think he might be the first serial entrepreneur that we've talked to. And it seems like he just does a lot. So is that something that you're interested in eventually? Do you see yourself more as maybe doing entrepreneurship now and then doing something else down the road? Or I guess, how are you thinking about that?
I think I'm like a lot of the people that we've already kind of talked to that once you get that uh entrepreneurial bug, I don't see myself like wanting or pursuing corporate America as much, like wanting to go back to a regular 9 to 5. So I think like this has been a really good experience. Definitely a lot of like hurdles and challenges, but there's a lot of fulfilling moments as well. And to actually kind of build stuff and to do something that you know we kind of have ownership over and has a positive impact on society, on the community. I think that kind of stuff really resonates with me more than just kind of like punching a clock, regardless of the amount of money, really. So yeah, I think entrepreneurship for me is kind of like here to stay. I would love to be in a position like Jay, where I can work on several different ventures, because I think it's just it just breathes a breath of fresh air into like your life, like being able to like challenge yourself in very different ways. Both you and I kind of entered into this venture without any real footwear experience, and we spent a lot of time learning about it. And it's definitely been something that's been challenging, but like I said, very rewarding. So I think this is like something that I would definitely do for the rest of my working life. What about you?
I feel I feel similar. So for me, I'm one of those guys, and I don't know if you're similar, but I just have a ton of ideas, a ton of kind of like entrepreneurial ideas. And I've been that way for basically since at least college. Maybe I think even like when I was younger, my first kind of like dream career was being an inventor. So when I was like in elementary school, middle school, things like that, I would think up potential inventions. So ways to kind of like solve problems that I was having in my personal life or that I was seeing people have, things like that. So more kind of like tangible, almost like gadgets and stuff like that. And then as I got a bit older, I got more interested in like fashion, sports, media, all that kind of stuff. So I still have a ton of ideas, and some ideas I think are pretty good. But I just kind of have to consciously tell myself, like, you can't really go after that idea right now because it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get that thing off the ground. And right now, the focus has to be on worldy. But I think if I were to eventually, if we were to sell the company, or if I were to leave or become an advisor as we grow and bring on like a professional CEO, executive board, all that kind of stuff, then I would want to pursue some of these other ideas that I have. But right now I feel like I just have to be very focused on this because it takes a lot of time and effort. And as we've seen, it's been like 2 years and we're making a ton of progress, but we still haven't launched. So I think we just need to continue to put in that same level of effort if we want to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, 100% agree. And definitely have a whole bunch of ideas that I would love to pursue, and then ideas regarding Worldy that I would love to pursue. So by no means am I do I see the finish line with Worldy. I think there's just the tip of the iceberg. I know that's kind of like a cliche, but like I think there's a lot more to it than possibly we even realize, but definitely than the public at large kind of realizes. I definitely want to be much bigger than just like a shoe company. The idea is to be something much more significant. So yeah, no, I think at this particular stage, I think they call it like entrepreneurship or whatever, when you're actually like within the business and trying to grow these ideas within that particular business or company. So I agree with all of that.
Yeah. And then one of the things that we both kind of wanted to talk about related to that conversation was this idea of trading up, even in a down economy. So Jay gave a couple examples. The one was a guy who maybe makes $50,000 a year and has a $2,000 set of golf clubs, or a girl who just graduated from college and has some super expensive designer bag. So how do you think that idea applies to our business at all? Or at all, if at all, I should say.
Yeah, so when I first heard it, I don't know if I thought like, "Oh, man, this definitely applies to us." But then as I got a chance to kind of digest what Jay was saying and think about like what we were considering our target consumer, perhaps it's a bit broader than what we even considered, because of the ability for an individual to um, relieve themselves of the cost of buying multiple shoes for specific sports. So perhaps it's a situation where the demographic, because we've kind of toyed with the idea and still have to get like a cost breakdown in order to really figure out like what the price is going to be. I know we have like an ideal price for it, and we want to make it accessible, but we realize that with certain prices, depending on like what we kind of utilize in terms of material and the design itself, it may price some people out. But listening to what Jay said about trading up, it actually might not, because now that person, instead of like buying 3 pair of $20 shoes, they buy one shoe that's around that $60 mark. So I think like in that instance, maybe it's a bit of like that trading up that Jay was kind of describing. And that the reason why a person would do that is because they see like that benefit of not having, because it's almost like a break even, because they're not having to pay for other shoes. And so I think that is kind of how I thought about it when I really had a chance to consider what Jay was saying with trading up.
Yeah, I think how trading up applies to his business is a little bit different from how it applies to our business. And you're just basically alluding to that, because the examples that he was giving, and even with ice cream, it's kind of like this is a person spending on themselves. It's almost like an indulgence. Whereas for us, it's like this is a parent that's investing in their kid. So it's the same kind of idea of, even if you don't have a ton of money or shoes are getting more and more expensive, you still want something that's quality and you're willing to spend more for something that's high quality. So I think that's kind of the thing that ties together what Jay is saying and kind of like what we're trying to do. Not necessarily that buying more expensive kids shoes is an indulgence. It's just more like, I want to invest in the areas that matter, and my kids' health, safety, and their ability to explore different sports, have fun. That's something that matters to a lot of parents and something that they're willing to invest in.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And that's why it took me a second when Jay was talking to like how to figure out how it translates to our particular venture. Which I guess maybe is a good segue into like zigging or zagging when others are zigging. I don't know. Like maybe I got that mixed up. But anyway, doing the opposite of what mainstream America's doing. How do you think that applies to us, and what do you even think about that concept?
It's a concept that I hear a lot. I've always heard it as zigging when others are zagging, but it sounds like it's really zagging when others are zigging, which is a bit hard to get used to. But I was thinking about that, and I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. Maybe it is this idea, maybe it's related to the idea of trading up, where maybe a lot of companies are putting in cheaper materials, maybe making things less durable because kids already go through shoes so quickly. So maybe it's almost like zigging or zagging when others is zigging is investing in the product more and trying to build something that's super durable, that's going to last. And then, I mean, potentially that goes to the sustainability, portion that we care about. Maybe it allows parents to hand those shoes down to younger siblings, things like that. So that's just an initial idea, but I'm not exactly sure how we would incorporate zagging when others are zigging. So I guess, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I know Jay was mentioning it from a marketing perspective. Like, I think they were using long form video when everybody else is kind of going to the TikTok, YouTube short, that short form video. And he was mentioning that like Meta's algorithm, like really like, I guess, plays to the short form versus long form. But for us, I was thinking like zagging is doing something radically different than the rest of the industry does, especially the sports footwear industry does. And I thought back to like our early idea of manufacturing stateside, like having everything done here in the States, very local as well. That's not something that footwear companies are doing for several reasons. Like, the expertise is not here, the facilities, and then the cost of doing stuff on this side of the ocean is quite high. But I think there are ways to do it. There are pioneers out there who are coming up with ways to accomplish it, and I think we're still focused on being able to accomplish that in the future as well. So that may be our zag, is going out and really like applying the concept of manufacturing athletic footwear here in the United States.
That's a good point. And then you mentioned a little bit about, maybe that applies to marketing. So one of the things that we've talked about a few times, and I can't remember if we talked about it on this podcast yet or not, but we see a lot of the same messages in the athletic shoe and just athletic apparel space, where it's the same kind of like aspirational story over and over and over again. And if you can almost make a parody of that or satire that in terms of like how serious people are taking sports at such a young age, and then flip it on its head and basically say, no, that wasn't a serious commercial. That's actually trying to poke fun at how crazy some of you parents are getting with youth sports, and really the focus should be on fun. So it's almost like poking fun at other people in the industry and how kind of the youth sports space is now. So maybe that's a way to zag when others are zigging, and kind of differentiate our brand a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one too. That's definitely zagging instead of zigging. Kind of switching gears just a little bit and talking about the unboxing experience that Cold Case provides. And I thought it was like they really take that to the next level with what they provide with their DTC ice cream, like the golden spoon shovel or whatever. The ingredients, how they kind of list them out, really cool, and it kind of like coincides a bit with how we are approaching the unboxing experience. I don't know if you want to kind of fill in. I know we've talked about it before, but what are your thoughts about that? And then also, what are your thoughts about like the benefit or the cost benefit of having such a kind of extravagant unboxing experience?
Yeah, Jay said something kind of interesting on that, because I asked him specifically about, how do you do that financial calculation in terms of whether it makes sense to invest in that unboxing experience or not. And basically what he was saying is like, if we have to incur 50 cents more in expenses basically to make someone happy when they've already spent $150 with their brand. And that's not really a very big expense at all. And if it brings joy to the person, if it makes them more likely to share that experience on social media or with their friends, then it's definitely worth it, even if you can't necessarily measure the value of it. So I think for us, it's looking at ways where we can invest, a small amount of money or some amount of time to just make that unboxing or purchase experience fun for parents and kids, and make it more likely to be shared on social media and, like I said, with friends, things like that, because I think that's just a way that you can go viral or quickly grow through word of mouth, all that kind of stuff. And that's almost like free marketing. So that's almost the way I think about those expenses. It's marketing. It's not really a product or COGS cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Switching gears just a little bit. Jay mentioned there's this way to try cold case without having like all the items that you'd get in like the unboxing experience. I think you get like 6 different flavors, and it really gives you an opportunity to experience this like decadent like ice cream that's different than like the mainstream ice cream. How does that even like translate to us? Like, how can we get people in the door to try our product so they can get accustomed to it and figure out like, oh yeah, this is what they mean by like the worldy experience?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about that too. And when I talked to Jay for the first time, maybe like a year ago, at this point in time, what he was saying is when he starts out a business, what he does is he gives a potential customer the product and then basically asks for it back after a week or two. And if they don't want to give it back, then that means that basically the product is pretty good. So he did that with Pillow Cube, for example, let people take it home, sleep with it for a little bit, and then said, "Hey, can I have that back?" And then if they said no, then that's a good sign. So I was thinking, based on that conversation and this recent conversation we had with Jay, is there any way that we can do that with our product? And I think it's hard because if you give it to a kid, they're not going to be like, "Oh my God, I love this shoe so much. It's so great. Don't give it back," things like that. So maybe it's almost like if you can show parents how much hassle it reduces in their life by not having to keep up with a bunch of different shoes, then maybe they get hooked on it. But it's almost like you'd have to give the shoes out for free. So I don't really know how we do it. Maybe it's something at events or something like that. But did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you hit on it a little bit towards the end, like having those like pop-up events, getting an opportunity to like show up at like some kind of like community I guess event, whether it's like soccer tournaments or just like soccer games, having some kind of event that we throw, like getting people a chance to try it on, to wear it out on the playing field, to wear it on courts, to really like have that type of experience, to try before you buy type of situation, which kind of coincides with some of the ideas that we have about like experience stores. I think that may be the best way to have consumers understand and try the product prior to kind of committing to it. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way for me to like have them try the brand.
That makes sense. And then just going back a little bit, what were your thoughts on the unboxing experience? Because I don't think I asked.
No, I think the unboxing experience is significant, especially like I know eventually we kind of want to move to retail, and that may be something that we do right out the gate. But as a DTC brand, I think in order for us to really kind of compete with the in-store providers, we should have some type of unboxing experience that kids look forward to, like that makes it a bit more fun. Because just how you were talking about how Jay was like, oh, we'd pay the extra 5% for that fun, that fun element. And I think that's how we kind of approach it the same way. That's a very important pillar of our company values, is fun. And so I think making the product fun means also making the ramping up that anticipation, and kids enjoy getting things and receiving like something that's a bit surprising. And so I think like that unboxing experience is central to having that like experience, that worldy experience.
Yep. And then something else that Jay was mentioning is basically as an entrepreneur, you look at industries or products from the outside and you're like, this needs to be better in this way. I can totally do it. And then once you actually get into the industry, you start building the product, you realize it's a lot harder than you thought. So do you feel like that's something that you've run into as basically a first time founder in an industry with where you have no experience, or has it felt more like smooth sailing?
Oh, definitely not smooth sailing. I know just earlier we were just talking about the manufacturing piece. We came in there with a bit of naivety, like thinking that we could do it right off the bat. Like, no way are we going to be over in Asia, like producing. We're going to be at the very least in South America or Mexico or something like that, and hopefully in the US. But it's just much more difficult than we anticipated. And I think that's some of the stuff that we kind of like come across. And that's just like one example. The other example could be just like the shoe itself, like designing this type of shoe. We thought would be relatively easy. We figured that we could use a couple of like concepts that were already out there that worked, and use that as a way to inspire. So for instance, like spikeless golf shoes and foot sole shoes, indoor soccer shoes, cleats. We thought that we could use that and quickly come up with that type of shoe that would work on multiple different surfaces. Much more difficult to accomplish than just kind of like Frankensteining different specific shoes and trying to make it into like a shoe that rules them all. So yeah, I think those would be like two of the examples that I'd kind of go with. I don't know. You could probably add a few more.
I think no, those are right. Just generally speaking, I think we talked to someone recently where they said if they knew how hard it was to start a business in their space, they wouldn't have done it. So I think that's also part of being naive as an entrepreneur. You're like, this is easy, or this should be easy. And then you keep believing until you realize, oh, this is really hard. And then you're either too deep or you're like so passionate about it at that point that you don't want to stop. So I feel like for sure, I thought it was going to be way easier than it actually is. The manufacturing has been hard. The like getting our vision into a tangible design has been hard. The timeline is just super long. I mean, it's going to be super expensive, all this kind of stuff that I didn't really realize. And I guess we could have easily done research or talked to people to see how hard it was. But I think before you actually do it, you're always going to think, I'm used to doing hard things. If anyone can do it, it could be me. So I think that's just part of the nature of being an entrepreneur. You have maybe confidence that is not justified, but that's part of the reason why we can be successful.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. You got to have that like to give it a football analogy, you got to have that like DB confidence, that cornerback confidence. You get beat deep and then you come back and you forget that play and you go on and make an interception or make a huge breakup or something like that. So yeah, I think that's kind of like entrepreneurship. Like you take a bunch of losses, but then you really celebrate those wins. So I think that has actually, like you mentioned, slowed us down a bit, and we have to be very I guess cautious and understand like, this is going to be something that's going to take some time, making sure that we're really being intentional about the design, intentional about the marketing strategy, and really kind of going at a pace that we thought we were going to like blow out of the water. So we're really like slowing it down. There is like a different strategy to that. I think I heard like maybe it was a Stanford professor talk about failing fast. What's your I know that there are some benefits to failing fast because you can get instant feedback, you can kind of revise the product, you can make it better. But we've kind of like had the approach that we want to make that first impression a really good impression because you only get one shot at that. So what are your thoughts though about failing fast?
I think it's kind of like a hot button issue because I hear a lot of people say that, because I used to hear that all the time, that in startups you need to fail fast. Now I see a lot of people say like, no, failing fast is bad, especially if you're not learning along the way. So I think it's a bit nuanced, and especially for consumer companies, it's a bit different because you don't have the luxury of rolling out an update overnight, or something like that, because it's basically like, okay, we're going to have thousands of pairs of shoes. We're going to start selling them. And if there's some issue with them, then as soon as we realize there's an issue, I don't know if we'd want to continue to sell them. Like if we know that they rip after a day or something, you probably don't want to sell the rest of those shoes. So failing fast would actually be like pretty costly in that context. So I think it's about being nimble, and in areas where there's not a lot of money on the line, you can fail fast. So like with our website, for example, it's fine to have stuff up there that maybe doesn't really resonate, get feedback, quickly iterate, stuff like that. But on the actual product itself, I think it's pretty important to go into the market with a product that we feel really confident in and that works well compared to other things on the market, because there's already such a high level of quality in the market that if we come with some shoe that's like really low quality, doesn't last, all that kind of stuff, then I think a lot of the confidence and trust in the brand that we've built to date is going to be gone almost overnight.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like failing fast, I don't believe is like industry agnostic, because we're dealing with like kids products, and I think failing fast really works in like the tech industry, where you can kind of like come up and you can come up with an update and run it through and have it out in a day or hours, or a very short time frame. Whereas for us, it could be like the death stroke if you fail fast. Like you could be done, especially with like kids product. If you don't provide like a good product out of the gate, you can lose a lot of that trust, especially if you're not like, if you're a brand new startup, you don't have a whole lot of credibility in the space, and you come out with something that doesn't work or is painful or, uncomfortable or whatever, like it doesn't work as a footwear product for kids. I it's going to be an uphill battle after that. I think it gets really steep after that. So that's why I think this type of approach for us with this product, with this industry that's focused on kids footwear, it's important to be very intentional about it and to be very careful about it. So you have that, you don't have to worry about like climbing that steep grade, because you've built that credibility with that first impression.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of relates, that conversation we just had relates to another point that Jay had, which was towards the end. He said that you can't really, or you shouldn't run a consumer company like a tech company. And some of the most successful consumer companies that he's aware of, they're super lean. Say they might have like tens of millions of dollars in revenue and only 40 to 50 employees. So we've run things pretty lean to date. Would you want to continue to do that moving forward? I guess what were your thoughts on that point that he made?
No, I thought that like resonated with me, because yeah, I think running lean for us is kind of running smart, because we're not going to have the same margins for a long time that like these huge footwear brands have, because we don't have the type of, we're not scaled to that level. So we have to be, even if we're successful with our launch, we have to continue to have that like lean mantra, because we still are competing and fighting an uphill battle with these larger brands and larger margins. And so we have to be smart about like how we what we do with the dollar. And I think that really made a whole bunch of sense, not to have like these huge like employee pools like an Allbirds that Jay was mentioning, but to really kind of stay true to like our idea and making sure that we're kind of building the best product, and understanding that cost is going to be a huge hurdle for a smaller brand like us.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no need to hire unless it's something we really think we need to do, and it's a need on the team, and we have kind of like a clear scope of work for that person to do. And I've seen examples of companies that have like grown pretty quickly with only like 5 to 10 employees. So if it's doable, I think we should try to do it. And then, if you need to hire, you can always do that, but it's pretty hard to fire people, and you can't get the money back that you spent on salaries if it's kind of wasted. So I think it's better to run a little too lean than risk basically just overhiring like crazy. And then, so you mentioned one of the points you wanted to talk about was short form and long form video. And just for context, we've been talking to a lot of people who did Kickstarter campaigns to understand how they got their video made, how much they spent, things like that. And I'm starting to talk to some agencies to get quotes and things like that. So we've heard from founders essentially that, at least for that initial Kickstarter video, that you want to spend about $2,000. And then any agency I talk to, they're like, anything below like $20,000 to $25,000 is going to be difficult. So how are you thinking about the value of a longer video, like a Kickstarter video, versus maybe short form content, and how we should use that basically to launch and then in the early days of the business?
Yeah, no, I think the best approach is the approach that we've kind of talked about. And I think it came from someone else that we discussed Kickstarter videos, being able to utilize them for more than just the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding campaign, to get multiple uses out of it, maybe even able to like break it down into like short form. So I think the long form for us actually would make the most sense, especially if we were able to make it to where it could be used or cut and used in several different like ways. So having like a longer version of a video that we can kind of like introduce people to the product, introduce people to us ourselves, and then really get our ideas out there. And then from there, we can be able to take that video and kind of break it down into like that short form, like smaller clips that highlight like specific things in our message. So I think when we're talking about bang for our buck, when we're talking about being lean, if we can use things and reuse things in multiple and different ways, then we get the best utility and we can stretch that dollar just a little bit further.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And something that Jay mentioned is that basically iPhone cameras today are more powerful than professional grade cameras from like 10 years ago or so. So there's a lot that we could do, with ourselves with like an iPhone, or maybe getting a student to help us out. And I think we could get pretty high quality footage. It's just about kind of like writing the scripts, making sure that we touch on all the right points, and like you said, creating something that we can repurpose for social media, for our website, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with that.
I guess the last kind of takeaway that I had, because when I first talked to Jay, he was saying that he's going to focus on direct to consumer with Cold Case for maybe like a year or two, and then kind of like shift his focus to retail after that. But it sounds like since he's launched, basically he's realized how important retail is, and that's basically where people buy their ice cream. So I think we've gone through kind of a similar evolution where we want it to be almost like strictly direct to consumer and then go into retail later on. But we're starting to realize that a lot of people buy shoes, and especially kids' shoes, in person. So, focusing on retail sooner rather than later probably makes sense for us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think omnichannel is kind of the way to go. Like, you don't want to miss a customer where they're at. So we still should definitely have a robust like DTC presence, but we can't like ignore retail, especially sooner rather than later. Like, I think we need to kind of like launch with that type of like retail approach. I mean, it might be limited, it might be a regional kind of setup, but having like an omni-channel approach gives us, or cast the widest net, and gives us the best opportunity to really reach the consumer where they're at.
I think that's exactly right, and I'm in complete agreement.
Oh, sweet. I think that's it in terms of what I had coming out of that conversation. Really good. Awesome talking to Jay. Always good talking to him. A lot of crazy ideas over there Creatably.
Yeah.
In Cold Case is going to be an iconic one for them.
Yeah, I kind of have a good feeling about it too. So we'll wish them luck and kind of watch them from afar, and I guess maybe talk to Jay every now and then.
Absolutely. All right, man.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.